why? Yeah. Why when they're rolling, I don't get to watch any actual footage.
Over and over and over again. All right, well, let's kick things off this morning in the NBA with the Brooklyn Nets, who somehow, some way, are still title favorites despite all the drama, despite all their injuries, despite an active 8-game losing streak, still picked to win it all. But this morning, the focus, James Harden. Number of reports about his unhappiness there in Brooklyn, about possible trades in the works. The latest being Brooklyn has rejected any potential interest, any inquiries from the Philadelphia 76ers in what would be a Harden for Ben Simmons swap. All right, Nick, you're all over this. Should the Nets trade Harden for Simmons before Thursday's NBA trade deadline?
I think it would be a grievous mistake for Brooklyn not to move Harden before Thursday, because whether they have accepted it or not, James Harden is going to be a Philadelphia 76er for Game 1 of next season. The only real question that remains is, will he be a Philadelphia 76er before Game 1 of next season? And there is an element of the media covering this potential trade that I think flatly has it wrong, which is, well, if Brooklyn holds on to him, yes, James is a free agent this summer, assuming he opts out, but he would never sign with the teams that have cap space. So Brooklyn still holds the cards. No, they do not. Daryl Morey, once upon a time when he was running the Rockets, wanted to sign Chris Paul. And the Clippers were like, well, you don't have the cap space, and we're not going to sign and trade him to you. So Daryl Morey made sure the Clippers knew that, okay, but if I just stretch and waive Ryan Anderson, I will have the cap space. So it probably makes more sense for all parties involved for us to get together and do a trade. And they did. And the Clippers got Pat Beverly and Lou Williams and Montrezl Harrell. And it's like, hey, they got something for Chris Paul. That is the road the Nets are barreling towards, which is this summer, Brew. If they don't trade him now, here's all the Sixers have to do. You call up Oklahoma City or Detroit or San Antonio or Houston, any of those teams, Orlando, Wild's beloved Magic, and you say, would you like Ben Simmons? We would like draft picks. And you let them bid against each other, and you trade Ben Simmons into those teams' ample bounty of cap space. You then call the same group of teams and say, would you like Tobias Harris? If not, they can stretch and waive Tobias Harris, and voila, they have the cap space to sign James Harden outright. And the Nets are staring at a nuclear summer where Harden walks for nothing, where you are forced into signing Kyrie, Max, and that's your team. So tell me why that doesn't happen, Brew, and why the Nets wouldn't be best off getting a real asset, a blue-chip asset in Ben Simmons right now, rather than walk down the path of losing Harden for nothing, which they absolutely could.
Well, thank you, Nick, for that Philadelphia 76ers commercial, because that's what it was. All right, let me paint the great scenario how Daryl Morey and the Sixers can go ahead and get James Harden. And you're
That's how
right.
they got Chris Paul.
Morey is a cap genius. He did it with Chris Paul. Now, that trade worked out for the Clippers, too. They ended up getting a nice haul.
Yep.
It wasn't, we'll take Chris for nothing. You get nothing in return, Clippers. No, they did get a nice haul. You mentioned the players, and it worked out for them. That could be the case if your scenario comes true. That could happen for the Nets as well. But and Morey did it. Remember when Chris Bosh in 2014, when LeBron went back to Cleveland, and Chris Bosh was a free agent, Morey cleared the cap room to potentially sign Bosh and teaming with Dwight Howard and James Harden. Bosh decided to stay in Miami. So Morey and other GMs are capable of clearing cap room. There's no doubt about that. If Giannis Antetokounmpo all of a sudden said, you know what, I want out, 15 teams that don't have cap room right now would clear the room and go ahead and get him. So I hear what you're saying in that regard, but it is easier said than done, Nick. First of all, Ben Simmons, after all this, a year of sitting on your hands and not moving Ben Simmons because you wanted a great deal, you're going to trade him for pennies on the dollar this summer? Tobias Harris, 2 years, nearly $80 million left on his deal. Not going to just be easy to trade. Now, yeah, if you want to waive him and then stretch his salary out, okay. But now you basically got James Harden and Joel Embiid. And that's nice, a nice little duo.
And Seth Curry and Tyrese Maxey and Matisse Thybulle.
We'll see if you keep all those guys. Because I just don't think it's as easy as you painted it to be. Nobody's going to be in a hurry to help Daryl Morey and the Philadelphia 76ers go get James Harden. I'm talking about other teams around the league. If it's worth their while, sure. But they're not just doing Morey a favor like that. So it's not that easy. Bottom line, no. The Nets should not trade James Harden before the deadline. I'm convinced that if Harden remains with the Nets this year and they trade him and he wants to leave this summer, they'll be able to do a sign and trade with Philadelphia for Ben Simmons and something else, assuming Simmons isn't traded by Thursday. Here's the deal, Nick. This is year 3 of KD, Kyrie, and now you've added Harden. Mm-hmm. The first year, KD's hurt. The second year, all the big 3 are hurt here and there. And now this year, Kyrie's only playing half the games because he's not vaccinated. So you have already wasted your first 2 years of this experiment with the big 2 and now big 3. I'm not punting on year 3. And as good as Ben Simmons is and could be, one, there's a question mark of where his head is at. Is he rusty? What's he going to play like this year? In home games, I give up James Harden. Now I've got one scorer in Kevin Durant, and that's it, because Kyrie can't play. Yeah. And so I think if you get Simmons now, that could be nice in the future, because I like him with Brooklyn in the future when he's back to being himself. But right away this year, Wilds, I don't think Simmons would come in and fit in swimmingly. So your best shot is with Harden. They're 13-3 when the big 3 play. That's your best shot for this season.
Your best shot is with James Harden engaged, invested, and interested in playing for the Nets. I do not know that James Harden exists anymore. And I want to make this very clear, because maybe I didn't explain it properly. You don't need any team to do the Sixers any favor. We all agree that there are teams that would like to have Ben Simmons, particularly bad teams with a bunch of picks and cap space. You trade Ben this summer to the best available option of those, and then if no one wants to buy his Harris, you stretch and waive him. And then you are essentially, I heard Broussard say, trading Ben for pennies on the dollar. Well, you're trading him in order to get James Harden. So the reason the Nets Wilds are in such a bad spot is if the Nets call the Sixers and say, we want Ben, we want Seth Curry, and we want a pick. If Daryl and the Nets and the Sixers believe James is going to choose to come here, then they know they can get him essentially for Ben Simmons and a Tobias Harris dead cap hit. That's it. So why are you going to throw in Seth Curry or, God forbid, Tyrese Maxey or future firsts? The only reason you would throw in anything extra is because you want him for this year's playoff run. Once it gets to the summer, the Nets' negotiating power is gone. That's why I think they should do it right now. Because if you want to get any extra cream on top, you have to do it now. Or else, unless James Harden has a change of heart, James Harden loves the Sixers owner. He loves Daryl Morey. Added bonus, the Sixers hired Wilds, Jarrett the Javelin's father-in-law, Tad Brown, to be their team president. Remember when you loved Jared the Javelin? There's a little Patriots connection. He loves it. Like, there's a lot of connections to, James Harden's heyday in Houston, in Philly now.
All right, so really quick, and I know we're up against the break, and I'll throw it to you, Nick. We have seen the story of franchises be go all in, right? Brady and the Bucks, go all in. The Rams, go all in. The Lakers, for whatever it's worth, did go all in with this team, signing a bunch of veterans. They weren't thinking about the future. If I'm Sean Marks, aren't I abiding by that philosophy? We're like, you know what? We're all in. let the deadline pass. We're going to play with who we've got and try to win a championship now and worry about the summer when the summer comes.
Yeah, well, maybe. But if you're talking about the history of going all in, what if your own franchise's history of going all in was less than a decade ago? You went all in for KG and Pierce, and then you were in the wilderness for a half decade trying to come back from that. I know there aren't many Nets fans, but the ones that there are might be a little scarred from that experiment. And so I think that's I think that they are right now in the denial stage. The question is, are they going to get to the bargaining and then eventually the acceptance stage that James Harden's going to leave? James Harden is going to leave. The question is when. That's where I believe the Nets are at.
This summer.
All right, 55 hours and counting until the NBA trade deadline. Let's see what happens. We move on. We talk some Tom Brady. Is it more likely than not that he makes a comeback after what he said yesterday? You guys hear this? We'll share it with